Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Everybody's made the time change, so that's good. We are still in Genesis. I don't think we're going to be here for much longer. I think by the end of March, we will be done with Genesis, if not sooner. So, what did we learn about last week? Anybody remember? Who? Joseph? What about Joseph?
Sold into slavery by his brothers.
Yeah. Every older brother's dream to sell your younger sibling into slavery, or at least to the
Right.
circus. So yeah, his brother sold him into slavery. And then 38, we talked about Judah and Tamar and all that mess that happened there. So now we're into chapter 39. We're back on Joseph again. The chapter 38 pretty much just tells us what Judah was like, because it was his idea to sell Joseph into slavery. And so the people listening to Moses said, oh, well, that's what Judah's like. He follows false gods and all this other stuff. So if you want to promote slavery, follow false God. But if you follow the real God, you are against slavery. Okay. What should be important for them to know as they enter into the land of Canaan, where they have opportunities to follow false gods. All right. So here we go. Chapter 39. Verse 1, now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptians because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now, Joseph was well built. We'll get to that in just a second. So, verses 1 through 7. Joseph is blessed by God in Potiphar's house, right? So he's hanging down. Potiphar bought him from the Ishmaelites that the brothers sold Joseph to. And Potiphar was one of Pharaoh's officials. It says the captain of the guard. So that means he may have been part of the security team for Pharaoh. Kind of like Secret Service here for the president, all right? And that's probably what he was doing. And it also meant he was in charge of the prison that housed political prisoners, which will come up later. So the Lord was with Joseph. God didn't just abandon Joseph. God was with Joseph. And as we read through this, we notice that Joseph did not abandon God. He could have been like, God, why are you doing this to me? I don't want anything to do with you if that's the kind of God you are, that you're going to put me into slavery. Joseph stayed with God, remained worshiping God. He wasn't like Judah that we read in chapter 38 that worshiped other gods. Okay, so he remained with God. And because he kept with God, God continued to bless him. And as God blessed Joseph, Potiphar noticed. And it's kind of like we saw with Laban and Jacob. Laban knew that God was blessing Jacob, and so he wanted him to work for him. Basically wanted Jacob to be his slave, but we ended up with payment schedule there. So Potiphar sees Joseph, and he says, you know what? This guy's got it going. He has a good work ethic. He seems to be blessed by a God. Probably wasn't up on which God Joseph worshipped. So I'm going to start putting him in charge of things. And it ends up that he becomes in charge of everything that Potiphar owns.
Moses seems to really make a point of this because he repeats it 3 or 4 times in different ways.
Yes. And remember, Moses is speaking to people who are wandering around in the wilderness because they had rejected God, decided that God would not allow them to have or be able to take the promised land. And so they were constantly grumbling against God or against Moses, who was God's representative. And so Moses is saying, look, people, yeah, you're in this bad situation, but you are taken care of. God's providing food. And we read later in Deuteronomy that their clothes did not wear out while they were in this time. They didn't really need anything. And yet they were grumbling. And here's Joseph. He has nothing. He's not grumbling. He's being with God, and God is blessing him. So that should be a lesson to these people. Stay with God, and you will be blessed. God can do it no matter what your situation is. Okay? So Potiphar puts Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. So Potiphar just came in for lunch and supper, and that was it. He knew Joseph had everything taken care of. And now, the end of verse 6, starting verse 7. Now, Joseph was well built and handsome. That right there is enough to get him in trouble. And after a while, his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, come to bed with me. All right, so sexual harassment in the workplace here. Actually started way back with Abraham, but this is another instance. But he refused. With me in charge, he told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns, he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? Notice he is appealing to two things. Number one, my master trusts me. Potiphar trusts me. How could I go against him and do something with his wife? But then he also doesn't leave it there. He says, how could I sin against God? So he understands that this would be a sin against God to go with Potiphar's wife. Verse 10, and though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. So this wasn't a one-time deal. She kept coming after him day after day after day. And Joseph kept saying, nope, don't want to go there. I'm not going there. Verse 11, one day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. My question is, did she send everybody away knowing Joseph would come in and she could try it all on her own? She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. So his outer garment she had in her hand. He still had we would consider it a full garment, but another garment underneath, and he ran out. He didn't run out naked. Okay, that's not happening. So she has the cloak in her hand. And now we get into the mystery story. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. Okay, is that anywhere close to what actually happened? No, not anywhere close. Yeah. She didn't scream. She was going, come here, big boy. And the cloak, he didn't take it off. She jerked it off of her, jerked it off of him, and held on to it. So now she is framing Joseph. Okay. And that is just with the servants. Verse 16. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him this story, that Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. So she is consistent. He came in to me, I screamed, and then he ran, but he left his cloak here. When his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, "This is how your slave treated me," he burned with anger. Now, from Potiphar's view, I can see why. All right. He thinks this trusted person has now tried to do things with his wife he shouldn't. And so he is angry, extremely angry. So, verse 20, Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. All right. So, once again, Potiphar is in charge of this prison for political prisoners. The prisoners that the king wants held go into this prison. There are other prisons for just regular people, thieves, and so on. This was a special prison, and it may have even been within Potiphar's house. We don't know. But while Joseph was there in the prison, okay, back up a little bit. So, verse 7 through 18, Joseph is wrongly accused, okay, by Potiphar's wife. And then we get verse 20, where the master gets all heated and throws him into prison. It's actually starting verse 19. So now we're on, verse 20. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. God has not abandoned Joseph yet. God will not abandon Joseph. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. So Joseph continued to follow God here. God blesses him. The warden, Potiphar, is in charge of the prison, but there is a warden to do the day-to-day activities. All right. So this warden sees Joseph, and just like Potiphar noticed that everything is blessed whenever Joseph's around, he puts Joseph in charge. He is a trusted person. Verse 23, the warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. All right, so Joseph is now imprisoned for something he did not do. He was framed. And I know in prison you hear all kinds of people say, I didn't do it, but he really didn't. All right. Chapter 40. Sometime later, so we don't know what time, how long time, but sometime later, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. So let's get these two guys straight here. So the cupbearer was a very important position. Anything that came, any food that came to the king had to go through the cupbearer. Okay. He was a very trusted associate. In fact, Nehemiah. Go to Ezra. Gone too far. Nehemiah 1. Last, when they have it, 1:11 says that Nehemiah was the cupbearer to the king of Persia. Okay, so this Nehemiah is a Jewish person. He is the cupbearer, a very trusted position within that realm. All right, and this is a good time to plug. When we get done with Genesis, I'll have a few weeks left. We're going to head into Nehemiah. Okay. And then in the fall, hopefully, we're going to look at Job. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. Okay. So we're going to look at Job in the fall. All right. So we have the cupbearer. Now, the baker was just a baker. Okay. He bakes all the stuff for the king. So they had offended their master, the king. What has probably happened here is some poison has gotten towards the king. He didn't actually get poisoned, but it got close to him and was discovered between the time the cupbearer would have tasted it and the king. So it was probably a baked good. So he didn't know, the king didn't know whether it was the baker who put it in there or the cupbearer slipped it in after he tasted it. All right, so two different scenarios. Since he didn't know which one, he just imprisoned both of them. So Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard. So this prison is in Potiphar's house, and the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. So notice the captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph. Who was the captain of the guard? Who did you say? Potiphar. So these two were very important. Potiphar, still probably keeping track of Joseph, understands that he is still responsible, and he puts these two under his watch. Now, after they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. So we're going to get into the cupbearer's dream in verses 9 through 15. It is not like Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, I had a dream. This is just totally different. Verse 6. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, "Why do you look so sad today?" Notice something. This is a prison. And yet Joseph is concerned about these people. Why do you look so sad today? There must have been something really wrong, very different about how they acted that day than other days. And Joseph noticed. He has compassion on people, probably because he's connected with God. All right, we both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams." In other words, tell me your dream. God will tell me what the interpretation is. It's all on God. All right, cupbearer's dream, starting verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. He said to him, "In my dream I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. I took the grapes, squeezed them into the Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand." This is what it means, Joseph said. "The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention to the Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in a dungeon. I'm innocent." So the cupbearer's dream, there's fruit, and he squeezes the fruit, goes into a cup, and he hands it to the king. And Joseph says, "Okay, so within 3 days, you're going to be put back into your same position. When you get there, remember me. I am unjustly imprisoned here." All right, baker's dream, starting verse 16. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, so he's saying, "All right, this sounds good to me. Let's see what mine means." He said to Joseph, "I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread, and the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head." I'm sorry, but at what point do you think that's good? "This is what it means," Joseph said. "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. You do not have to remember me." So I think the baker was probably guilty of what the crime, okay? Or at least that's who's going to get punished for it. Verse 20. Here comes the fulfillment. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday. So Pharaoh has a birthday, has a party. And he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer, the chief baker, in the presence of his officials. In other words, he brought them into them. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. but he impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. So Joseph's interpretation was correct. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. You had one job. Tell Pharaoh about me. And you failed. But you know what? It wasn't time yet. We can criticize the chief cupbearer all we want to, but I think God may have kept that out of his mind until the appropriate time. Had Joseph been put in before Pharaoh now, things would have gone very different. Okay, so chapter 41. Pharaoh has dreams now in verses 1 through 32. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up, going, I am not having pizza before I go to bed again, ever. So this dream is you have these big, fat, lovely-looking cows, well-tended cows. And then you have these other that are kind of puny, skinny, their ribs are showing, they're terrible looking, they're matted. They got the ugly ones come up and eat the really good ones. But even though they eat the good cows, they don't get any fatter. They stay lean. And I know every woman would like that diet. Eat whatever you want to, just stay small. So that's Pharaoh's dream. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. So he has another dream, and you have these heads of grain that are nice and plump and like they should be, and you have these other sickly things that are just like knots. The sickly ones, 7 sickly ones, eat the big ones, but the 7 sickly ones are still sick looking. And Pharaoh wakes up and says, that's it, I'm done. I'm not going back to bed anymore tonight. I'm done. Verse 8, in the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. No one could understand what this means. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, today I'm reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now, a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretations of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. Finally, he remembers 2 years later. But this is the time. This is when it should have been brought to Pharaoh's attention about the dreams. Verse 14, so Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. You don't want to come before the king all disheveled and dirty like a prisoner. That was not allowed. You had to come in your best clothes, clean, shaven, looking your best. Verse 15, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it, but I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. Now, this is where Joseph could have said, yeah, I'm great at interpreting dreams. Tell me. But he says, I cannot do it. Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Joseph is always pointing towards God, always staying with God. Not about me. It's about God who can interpret it.
And go back to shaving.
Uh-huh.
Hebrew didn't shave, did they?
Yeah.
Yeah, they did or didn't?
Yes, everybody would have shaved. In fact, the Hebrews did not have the beards that the Egyptians would have had, usually. Some of them did. But he would have come in clean shaven. Or at least with a little Egyptian goatee, you know. You gotta be stylish when you go in front of Pharaoh. Come on. Verse 17, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. I like that little added part there. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. So apparently their beauty treatment didn't work. Verse 22, in my dream I saw 7 heads of grain full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up 7 good heads. I told this to the magicians, but none of them could explain it to me. Verse 25, then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain, scorched by the east wind. They are 7 years of famine. So what he's saying is that 7 cows and 7 grains represent the same thing, 7 good years. The ugly cows and the sickly looking grain both represent the same thing, 7 years of famine. Okay. So verse 28. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. So you're going to have 7 good years and 7 bad years, 7 years of famine. And the 7 years of famine are going to be so horrible that you won't even remember the 7 good years. And the reason it was done in 2 different forms is because God has said, this is most certainly going to happen. There's no changing it. Verse 33. So now we get into Joseph's plan. And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. All right, so his thought is, okay, what we're going to do is, Pharaoh, I want you to take 5% of everything that these people get in from their harvest and from their cattle, etc., for the next 7 years. That way they can live on that for the next 7 years. And you know, this sounds like it's Joseph's plan, but I think it's really God's plan. If we go to Deuteronomy 14. Deuteronomy 14. I will get there. This was much easier practicing it. 14, verse 28, 29. God is giving instructions to the Israelites, and this is where we get our thing about tithe. We sort of said tithe, okay? Verse 28, at the end of every 3 years, bring all the tithes of that year's produce and store it in your towns, so that the Levites who have no allotment or inheritance of their own, and the foreigners, the fatherless, and the widows who live in your towns may come and eat and be satisfied, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. So the tithe normally was eaten by the people, okay, at the temple or at a sacred place. But God says every 3 years, I want you to bring all the tithes into a storehouse, storehouses within your areas, into the Levitical cities. These supplies then will be used to feed the Levites, who are the priests, so take care of your spiritual needs there. And they'll also take care of all the poor people within your country. Okay, so that kind of sounds like the same plan that Joseph is presenting here in verses 33 through 36. Store everything up, and then you'll have supplies for later. Okay. Verse 37. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, "Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom this is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you." Okay. So all these people, all these wise men and so on, they couldn't do anything. And Pharaoh says, "Okay, Joseph is better than you all. I'm going to put him in charge. He is going to become second in command in Egypt." Think about something. How does that make Pharaoh's son feel, who is supposed to be second in command in Egypt?
Jealous.
Jealous. And you see the seed here of when we get to Exodus, and it says the king had no regard for Joseph. Who do you think that was? Probably Pharaoh's son. And why? Because Joseph was put ahead of Pharaoh's son in this instance. Okay, so verse 41, Joseph is given prestige. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. So this signet ring was like a seal, okay? And you would put it into wax, and when that seal was on a document, it meant Pharaoh gave the full weight of his power and authority on that document. So if Joseph wanted to write up a law of some kind and seal it, that would have had the full weight of Pharaoh behind it. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. So he was dressed as royalty. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command. And people shouted before him, "Make way!" Not because he was a bad driver, but because he was important. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Once again, I can just see Pharaoh's son fuming. This slave, and he's not even an Egyptian, and you're putting him over the whole country, over me? Verse 44, then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt." Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Sephanath-Paneah, and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Okay, so he gets a new Egyptian name. He gets an Egyptian wife from a priest, which would be a very high position to have. And so Joseph is now going native, I guess. He's becoming Egyptian. And he goes throughout the land. And what he does as he goes throughout the land is he looks at things and makes sure everything starts happening the way it's supposed to do. He starts building the infrastructure for this collection for 7 years. Verse 46. So 46 to 52 is before the famine. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt during the 7 years of abundance, and the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city, he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. So they had such abundant crops during this 7 years that Joseph just stopped keeping records. Everybody's kept bringing it in. Forget the records. We'll just keep piling it on. Notice he is 30 years old when this starts. He was about 17 years old when he got sold into slavery. So 13 years he's been either enslaved or in prison. But now he's going, all right? And he is gathering 5% from everybody. Everybody contributes 5%. Now, verse 53 to 50. Here we are. Verse 50. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, which means, or sounds like, or maybe derived from Hebrew, forget. In other words, he is forgetting this past. Sounds like he may have forgiven his brothers since he's now in a good position. And said, "It is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, fruitful, twice fruitful. Now that could have a double meaning. And said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering." So it could be, one meaning could have been, well, I now have 2 sons, I'm twice fruitful. But he says, it's because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. Okay. Verse 53. So during the famine, now is what we're getting to in verse 53 to 57. The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." So don't bother me. That's why I put Joseph in charge. You all need food? Go see him. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt. Notice something. These people gave up of their own crops 5%. Now they have to buy it back. It wasn't, okay, we're going to collect all this food and then everybody can get food when they need it. No, you're going to buy it back. Pharaoh is going to come out ahead in this.
Was it 20%? It says a fifth.
Yeah, a fifth.
You said 5%.
Is it 5%? Okay, a fifth. That would be 20%, wouldn't it? This is why I failed math. Which verse was that?
It says was 33,
Oh, yeah.
34. 30.
Yeah, take a fifth of the harvest, 20%. Yeah, 20%. I was too. I need to go back to math class. So 20%. Pharaoh wanted more than God. God only wants 10. All right, so 20%, and now they're going to have to buy it back. Verse 57, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. So everybody's buying grain. Now, the whole world was not under famine. It was basically just this region. Egypt, so North Africa and up into Canaan, that area. You get past Canaan, it's desert anyway, it doesn't matter. So Canaan and northern Egypt. All right, chapter 42. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you just keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die." All right, so starting in verse 1, we're going to see the brothers being sent to Egypt. And Jacob, obviously Canaan is involved in this famine. All right. I mean, Canaan is Egypt adjacent. So they're involved in the famine. When they start running out of food, Jacob says, "Why are you guys standing there just doing nothing, looking at each other like, what do we do? Are you not intelligent? Go down to Egypt and get some food." Now, this is going to start, if you will remember back in Deuteronomy 15:13, where God said, "Your family, Abraham, is going to be enslaved in Egypt for 400 years. This starts that. This starts that movement of the family, not just Joseph, but of the family into Egypt. All right. Otherwise, Canaan may not have been under famine.
Egypt didn't have the same borders it does.
No, Egypt does not have the same borders it does today. It was broader. It went further south in the Nile. So Jacob says, hey, boys, get up, do something productive, and go to Egypt. I'm tired of looking at you. Verse 3, then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. Notice 10. How many are left, by the way?
2. There was 12 altogether.
Yeah, 12 altogether. Joseph is in Egypt, so that leaves 11. Yeah. So there's 11, but only 10 go down. So Benjamin is the one that gets to sit this one out. Yeah. And it may be that Benjamin took over Joseph's position as the most favored son, since he was the only son left of Rachel. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. Well, I would hope there's famine in Canaan, otherwise they're just mooching. Like, no, we got plenty of food. Let's go down to Egypt and get some of theirs. Verse 6. So here we go. Starting verse 6, the brothers are coming before Joseph, and this is where it really gets fun. Now, Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized him, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Where do you come from? He asked. Now, don't you think that seeing his brothers come and bow down to him reminded Joseph of the dreams he had? And instead of saying, see, I told you so, Joseph is going to test the brothers. He wants to make sure that they have changed, that they are not the same morally inept and corrupt people who sold him into slavery. He wants to make sure they've changed. So they're coming to him, but he pretends to be a stranger. In other words, he pretends to be fully Egyptian. He does not know these guys. So remember, he is dressed like an Egyptian. He walks like an Egyptian. No, that's a song. He dresses like an Egyptian. He speaks Egyptian. He's not speaking to them in Hebrew. And he has taken on the appearance of an Egyptian with the facial hair, etc. Okay, like you were talking about. The facial hair would be different, be shaped. Plus, we're going to see this here in a few minutes. Well, if it's at least 24 years since they've seen him, or 20 years since they've seen him. 13 years in captivity, and then 7 years of famine, and then here they come. Or 7 years of plenty, and then here they come. Okay? So it's been at least 20 years since they've seen him. Okay, so he speaks to them harshly. He's trying to make them think that he has no idea who they are. Where do you come from? He asked. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. Verse 8, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams. See there, he did remember his dreams about them and said to them, you are spies. The younger brother gets to have fun. You have come to see where our land is unprotected. In other words, you're coming and saying you need food, but what you're really doing is spying out the land so that you can come and take our food from us. You're spies. No, my lord, they answered. Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies. He's going, we'll see about that. No, he said to them, you have come to see where our land is unprotected. But they replied, your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with their father, and one is no more. They are liars. They knew that Joseph was not dead, that he had been sold into slavery, but they said, he's no more, he's dead. So Joseph said to them, it is just as I told you, you are spies. And this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you're not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you're spies. And he put them all in custody for 3 days. Okay, so he's throwing them in jail for 3 days. He was in jail a lot longer. But it's not just to get revenge on these guys. He's going to have someone monitoring them, listening to their conversations, seeing how they react with each other. Who's going to pop up and say, okay, I'll be the one that's, I'll go, trying to save their own skin. So there is a reason for him doing this. Verse 18, on the third day, Joseph said to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you're honest men, let one of your brothers stay here in prison while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. So he's saying, look, I understand I was a little harsh when I talked to you before. I fear God. Just one of you is all that has to stay. The rest of you can take provisions back to your household so they don't starve. I'm not totally cruel. Okay, so now it's just one person. Well, who are they going to give up on sacrificial fear this time? Verse 20, but you must bring your youngest brother to me so that your words may be verified and that you may not die. This they proceeded to do. So in other words, you guys, you have to bring your brother back or it's going to be dire consequences. You will be considered spies. Verse 21, they said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. Oh, they're being punished because of the way they dealt with Joseph. Little do they know. Yeah. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us. And Reuben replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? In other words, I told you so. Remember, Reuben was the one that tried to get him, just throw him in the cistern so he could come back and take him out. And they traded him off, sold him off before he got back. Reuben goes, I told you so. But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an account for his blood. They did not realize that Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. So he's speaking to them in Egyptian. They have no idea that he can speak Hebrew. They're talking back and forth in Hebrew, and he can understand everything they say. When I was in college, there were a couple of professors that were married to each other, and they taught sign language. So they would go out to eat, and they would use sign language while they're eating. And then they would listen to what people said around them at the other tables. This is kind of what's going on with Joseph. He's pretending that he doesn't understand, but he understands everything they say. Verse 24, he turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. So they didn't get to choose. He chose. And he got so emotional because they were talking about how they'd gotten rid of him, and now they're kind of repenting of that. He gets emotional and he leaves the room to have a good cry, and then comes back in after he's taken off fixed his mascara, because face it, the Egyptians had mascara, even the men had mascara. He comes back in and says, all right, I'm taking Simeon. Why would he take Simeon? Well, Reuben was the oldest. He should have been the one taken. He was responsible. But he figured out from what they were saying, Reuben didn't want to sell him in the first place. So Simeon, being the oldest one of those who want to sell him, he's the one he takes. He's the one responsible. Okay? So he takes Simeon. Verse 25. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. All right, so Joseph isn't just giving them the grain, allowing them to buy the grain. He gives them the grain and then gives them the money back. He is giving them the grain. And he can do that because he's second in command. Verse 27, at the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. And he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. My silver has been returned, he said to his brothers. Here it is in my sack. Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other, trembling, said, what is this that God has done to us? Okay, so in verse 25-38, we're seeing the brothers return home. All right, they get out of Egypt. They stop for the night at Motel 6 or whatever, and they find the silver in their bags. And they're going, he already thinks we're spies, and now we look like we're thieves. This is not going to go well. What is God doing to us? I mean, yes, we sold our brother into slavery, but we don't deserve this. Yes, you do. Verse 29, when they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, the man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. Okay, well, at least they told the truth on that part. Verse 33, then the man who is Lord over the land said to us, this is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then you will give your brother back. Then I will give your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land. All right, this is going to cause a problem, isn't it? Benjamin, the only son remaining, as far as Jacob knew, the only son remaining of Rachel. He has to go to Egypt with these guys. So, verse 35, as they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. So they apparently had only opened one before. All of them got their silver back. When they and their father saw the money pouches, they were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is against me. Once again, he's a drama queen. So, Joseph, as far as he knew, was dead. Simeon, he's just counting as dead because if they go back, he's not letting Benjamin go. So Simeon's dead. You all are just bringing all this tragedy on me. Why did I ever have children? Okay, so verse 37. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I will bring him back. Okay, so Reuben says, you can take my two sons and kill them if I don't bring Benjamin back. Why would he do that? Why wouldn't he say, you can kill me if Benjamin doesn't come back? Well, look at the reaction he's having with Simeon being gone. He wouldn't be able to, if he lost Joseph, Simeon, Benjamin, and Reuben. But you can lose a couple of grandchildren, that's no problem. This is just a weird family, okay? But that's why Reuben says this. He's trying to take responsibility. He is the oldest. He's the one responsible. He says, make me responsible. If I don't bring Benjamin back, you can kill two of my sons. But Jacob said, my son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow. In other words, I'm not letting Benjamin out of my sight. If anything happened to him, I would just kill myself. I would be done. I almost killed myself with Joseph, but I'm done. No more children to be lost, except for Simeon. And I didn't like him anyway. So we're going to stop there. Does Israel, Jacob, relent and let Benjamin go? Or does Simeon die? And actually, they all die because they can't go back and get more food without having Benjamin. So what happens? We'll find out in chapter 43. It is easier to see where God is leading when you know where God has been. So as we look at these stories, we think about how even in dire circumstances, God was with Joseph. And as we get into dire circumstances, whether it's financial or physical, emotional, God is still with us. If we will turn to God, he will be there. Right?
And you
Right.
notice how you're continually blessed.
Yes, continually blessed. And remember, blessing doesn't mean that you're going to be rich and powerful and all this like Joseph ended up being. Joseph was blessed even while he was a slave, even while he was in prison, because he had the presence of God with him. That was the blessing. And that's something that the people Moses is speaking to need to understand. The blessing is God's presence with you. Go outside, look toward the tabernacle, see this big cloud on top of it, or see the fire on top of it, and understand God's presence is with you. That is your blessing. Okay. All right. Thank you all.